I sold coffee off a cart near Hyde Park Corner for 9 years, rain or shine. I know the sound of that place the way you know your own heartbeat, the buses hissing at the lights, the pigeons that never learn, the wheels of 1,000 suitcases dragging across old stone. I thought I'd seen everything a person could see standing in one spot for 9 years. Then came the morning 3 teenagers asked a royal guard to sing them a song, and I watched a man who never moved once do the bravest thing I've seen a human being do. Let me tell it properly, from the start, because if I rush it, you won't feel what I felt, and I need you to feel it. It was a Tuesday in late September, one of those London mornings that can't decide what it wants to be. The sky was the color of dishwater, and there was a thin, mean little wind coming up off the park that got into your collar and stayed there. I remember I'd forgotten my good gloves at home, and I was blowing on my hands between customers. I remember the smell of wet leaves. Autumn was just starting to turn, and the big trees along the park had that first tired look, like they knew what was coming. The guard's name I didn't know yet. Nobody did. To me, he was just the tall one who'd been posted near the corner for the last few weeks. You get to know them a little even when they don't move, even when they never look at you. You start to recognize them the way you recognize regulars. This one stood so still you could have painted him. Bearskin cap pulled low, red tunic. That rifle held just so, chin up, eyes forward, staring at something none of the rest of us could see. I'd started calling him the statue in my own head, not to be rude, just because he was the stillest of the lot. The other lads would shift their weight now and then, or you'd catch a blink, a swallow, not him. He stood like the ground had grown up around his boots. That morning was quiet at first. A slow trickle of tourists, a school group in matching yellow caps being herded by 2 exhausted teachers, an old couple sharing a bag of chips at 9:30 in the morning, which I respected. I sold 4 coffees and a hot chocolate, and I was thinking about nothing more serious than whether I'd run out of oat milk before lunch. Then the 3 of them arrived. I want to be fair here because I've told this story a lot and people always assume the worst about them straight away. They weren't monsters. They were just kids. 19, maybe 20. 2 lads and a girl on some sort of trip, phones already out, already filming before they'd even decided what they were filming. You could tell they were the type who did everything for the camera. Everything was a bit a joke, a video for someone who wasn't there. The tallest one, the one in the bright orange jacket, he was the ringleader. I could see it in about 4 seconds. He walked like the pavement was doing him a favor. The other 2 orbited around him, laughing before he'd even said anything funny. They spotted the guard, and I felt my stomach drop a little because I'd seen this play out before. Not this exact thing, but the shape of it. Tourists who think a man who can't respond is fair game. At first it was the usual stuff. They stood too close. They pulled faces. Orange Jacket did that thing where he mirrored the guard's expression, stood at attention next to him, saluted like a cartoon. His friends howled. A few other tourists chuckled too, and I get it. It's a bit funny the first time. I've laughed at it myself. The guard didn't move. Of course he didn't. That's the whole point of him. That's the discipline. You could set off a firework in front of him, and he'd give you the same blank horizon he gave everyone. And that's where most people stop. They take their photo, they get bored, they move on to the next thing. These 3 didn't get bored, they got worse. Orange Jacket leaned right into the guard's face. I mean close. Close enough that the guard could feel his breath, I'm sure of it. And he said loud so his phone would pick it up, "Go on then, sing us a song." His mates cracked up. The girl was filming him filming the guard, this whole little pyramid of screens. "Sing us a song," he said again. "Come on, big man, one song, you lot must know one, sing for the camera." The guard didn't move. "Nothing, he can't sing." Orange Jacket turned to his audience, the phone mostly, but also the few tourists who'd gathered because a small crowd always pulls a bigger one. "He's not even real. It's a doll. Look." It's a doll they dressed up. And he flicked the guard's cap. I saw it. I was maybe 15 feet away wiping down the cart, and I saw his fingers actually flick the fur of the bearskin. A small thing. But something cold went through me. Because there are lines, aren't there? There are lines even for a joke. The guard's jaw tightened. That was it. That was all. A tiny movement, the muscle in his cheek there and gone. If you weren't watching him the way I was watching him, you'd have missed it entirely. But I saw it, and it told me everything. He was a man, not a statue, not a doll. A man standing in the cold being humiliated by a child and holding himself so still that only his jaw would betray him. I nearly said something. I want you to know that. I had my mouth half open. But what do you say? You're not allowed to interfere. There are actual soldiers who patrol, there are police, there are procedures. A coffee vendor shouting at tourists just becomes part of the circus. So I did what everyone does. I stood there, and I've thought about that a lot since. The girl had an idea. You could see it arrive on her face. "Do a little dance," she said, delighted with herself. "Sing and do a little dance. We'll make you famous." She started humming something and swaying, and the two lads joined in, this mocking little wiggle, arms flapping right in front of him, right in the man's face. An older woman near me, English, sensible coat, the kind of woman who spent a lifetime being appalled quietly. She tutted so loudly it was almost a word. "Leave him alone," she said, not to them, more to the air. Nobody listened. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. Through all of it, the flicking, the singing, the little dance, the phones shoved in his eyes, the guard just kept looking forward. At the road, at the park, at the gray September sky over the trees. Later, I understood what he was actually looking at. Because while those three kids were busy turning a soldier into a punchline, that soldier was watching something the rest of us were too distracted to see. And that is the part of the story I still can't get out of my head. That while he was being mocked, he was already working. Already awake in a way none of us were. He wasn't ignoring them out of pride. He wasn't ignoring them because the rules said so. He was ignoring them because there was a white van. I didn't notice the van at first. Why would I? It was just a van, parked half up on the pavement on the far side, near the entrance to the park, in a spot where vans park all the time, deliveries, contractors, the council, dirty white. No markings. I must have looked at it a dozen times that morning and it registered as nothing. Furniture. The eye slides right off things like that. But I noticed the guard's eyes. It was around the fourth or fifth time Orange Jacket demanded a song. I happened to glance at the guard's face, really look, and I realized his eyes weren't blank at all. They were fixed on a point past the shoulder of the boy taunting him, and they had moved just a fraction. But for a man who didn't move, a fraction was an earthquake. I followed his line of sight, and there was the van. At the time it meant nothing to me, a guard looking at a van. So what? My brain filed it under nothing and went back to worrying about oat milk. That's the honest truth. I had a soldier telling me something with his eyes and I couldn't read the language. The kids were still going. Orange Jacket had upgraded from asking to demanding, the way people do when they don't get a reaction. They push harder like the reaction is owed to them. "You're boring, mate," he said. "You know that? Dead boring. My Nan's got more life in her." He looked at his phone screen at himself. "Guys, this is going to blow up. The guard who can't do anything, look at him. He literally can't do anything. He literally can't do anything." I've turned that sentence over 1,000 times because it was so wrong it hurts. The wind picked up. A few of the yellow-capped schoolchildren had drifted over to watch, and their teacher was calling them back with that fraying patience teachers have. Someone's dog was barking somewhere. A bus pulled up at the stop and let out a sigh of people. Normal, all completely normal. The most ordinary morning in the world. And the guard's eyes moved again. This time I was watching for it, and I saw them flick left, back, left again, from the van to a pushchair to the van. A young mum had parked a pushchair near the railing while she dug in her bag for something, right in the open, maybe 20 feet from that dirty white van. And the guard was watching the space between them like it was the only thing in the world. I felt the first real prickle of unease then, not fear yet. Just that animal feeling you get older than thinking when something in your environment is wrong and your body knows before your mind does. The hair on my arms, that's real. That happened. I looked at the van properly for the first time, and I saw that it was sitting low, heavy, on its back axle sagging the way a vehicle sags when there's real weight in it. And I saw, this is the detail that still wakes me up, I saw that it had been left with its hazard lights off but its wing mirror folded in, and there was nobody in it and nobody near it, and it had been there, I realized, since before I opened my cart. Since before 6. I don't want to dress this up. I didn't put it together. I'm not going to pretend I did. I just felt wrong, that's all. A man selling coffee, feeling wrong, not knowing why. But the guard knew. He'd been standing there for the better part of 2 hours with a rifle he couldn't use and rules he couldn't break, being flicked and mocked and filmed, and the entire time his mind had been working the problem. Reading the van, reading the low axle, reading the emptiness around it, reading the pushchair and the mum and the school kids in their yellow caps and the old couple with their chips and the whole soft, unaware crowd of us going about our Tuesday. Orange Jacket, meanwhile, was building to his big finish. He decided the video needed a climax. He stepped back, spread his arms wide like a showman, and announced to the phone, "Last chance, soldier boy, one song, or I'm telling the whole internet you're a coward." And he leaned in, close as before, closer, his grinning face inches from the guards, and opened his mouth to say something else. And the guard spoke. "I need you to understand how much that costs. A royal guard on ceremonial duty does not speak. It is drilled into them so deep it becomes bone. They stand, they endure, they do not react, they do not engage, no matter what. It is the entire discipline. For him to break it, to actually make a sound, was like watching a mountain decide to walk." He didn't shout, "That's what got me." It wasn't a bark or a command. His voice was low and level and terribly calm, and he said just 4 words without ever moving his eyes off that van. "Get away from there." Orange Jacket laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, he speaks, say it again, do it again. Get away from there." And this time there was something underneath the calm, something that made the girl stop filming, something that made the old woman in the sensible coat go very still. It was the voice of a man who was not asking. For a second, nobody understood. The kids thought it was part of the bit. A couple of tourists laughed uncertainly. The young mum with the pushchair looked up, confused, because she didn't know she was the one being spoken to. And then the guard's discipline broke completely, and he did the thing he was never, ever supposed to do. He left his post. I have to stop on that because if you don't know what it means, the whole story falls flat. Those men do not move. It's not pride, it's not stubbornness, it's an oath made physical. They will stand while people scream in their faces. They will stand in the heat until they faint standing up. Leaving your post is the one thing you cannot do. It is the closest thing that world has to a sin. And he did it without a flicker of hesitation. One moment he was a red and black statue being mocked by children. The next he had turned, hard, boots ringing on the stone, and he was moving, not running yet, but moving with a speed and purpose that turned every head on that corner, straight toward the young mum and her pushchair. The kids scattered out of his way. Orange Jacket's grin fell off his face like something dropped. The phones, for once, forgot to follow. "Move away from the vehicle," the guard was saying loud now, his voice carrying that calm gone hard and flat. "Everyone move away from the white van. Now, move that way, go." And people did the thing people do, which is nothing. They froze. They looked at each other. A man in uniform is shouting, and the crowd's first instinct is confusion. Is this a show? Is this allowed? Is he serious? The young mum clutched the pushchair handle and stared at him like he'd lost his mind. He reached her in about 6 strides. He didn't grab the pushchair. I noticed even then how careful he was, how he didn't just seize it. He got between it and the van, put his own body in the gap, and said something to her low and fast that I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it worked. Her face changed. She started backing away, dragging the pushchair, and now she was moving fast, and fear is contagious. Thank God, more contagious than confusion, so the people nearest her started moving too. Away from the van, into the park, go. I was still behind my cart. I'll be honest with you, I hadn't moved. My legs hadn't caught up with my eyes, and then the guard turned his head, and for 1/2 second he looked directly at me. Right at me. The coffee man he'd never once acknowledged in weeks of standing near my cart. And he jerked his chin, "Get back, get them back," and something about being seen, being given a job, broke the freeze in me. I came round the front of the cart shouting. I don't even remember what. "Move, get back, come on this way," waving my arms like a lunatic, and I grabbed the elbow of the old woman in the sensible coat and pointed her toward the park gates, and she went, thank God, and the schoolteacher was already screaming at the yellow caps to run to me, run now, and the whole loose morning crowd started to come apart and stream away from that dirty white van. It's strange what you notice. I noticed that the guard had a limp I'd never seen because he'd never walked before, just slight, a stiffness in the left leg. And I noticed he'd stopped shouting general orders and had started grabbing specifics, an old man who couldn't hear, steering him bodily by the shoulders, 2 teenage girls glued to their phones, physically stepping in front of them and pointing until they ran. He was reading the crowd the way he'd read the van, working out who wasn't moving, going for them one by one. Orange Jacket and his 2 mates were just standing there, the 3 of them pale, the video finished and forgotten. And the guard reached them last, and he didn't waste a word of anger on them. He just said, "You, run, take them and run." And they ran, all 3, the bravado gone, just frightened kids now, sprinting for the trees. I want to say I understood in that moment what was about to happen. I didn't, not fully. Your mind refuses it. Even seeing a soldier clearing a crowd off a heavy, unmarked van, some stupid, hopeful part of you keeps saying it'll be nothing, it's a false alarm, it's a delivery, in a minute we'll all feel silly. That part of you talks right up until the second it can't anymore. The last person on that corner, apart from the guard, was a boy in a wheelchair. He was maybe 10. His dad had been pushing him and had gotten separated somehow in the surge of the crowd. I saw the dad 20 feet away, screaming the boy's name, being carried backward by the press of bodies fleeing, unable to fight his way back. And the boy was stuck. One of the front wheels had jammed against the raised lip of a paving stone, the way they do, and the boy was hauling at the rims with both hands and going nowhere, right out in the open, closer to that van than anyone. The guard saw him the same instant I did. And there was no calculation on his face. That's the thing I'll carry to my grave. No pause, no weighing it up. He just went. He crossed that open ground toward the van, toward it to reach the boy, and I stood at the park railing with a cluster of strangers, and I heard myself say, "No, no, no," very quietly, useless. He reached the boy. He didn't fumble with the wheel. He simply bent, took hold of the whole chair, and lifted it, boy and all, up off the ground and turned and began to carry it. This 10-year-old in his wheelchair lifted clean up against that stiff left leg away from the van, toward us, toward the gates, and he was moving as fast as a man can move carrying a child. His face a mask of pure effort, the bearskin cap gone somewhere, lost. I never saw it come off, but it was gone, and his hair was dark and matted with sweat in the cold. He got maybe 15 feet. I did not hear the explosion the way you'd think. That's a strange thing nobody tells you. There wasn't a bang. There was a pressure, a fist of air that hit my whole body at once and threw me back off the railing onto the grass, and then half a second late the sound arrived, but it wasn't a sound so much as the absence of all sound, a white wall that shut my ears off completely. The world went silent and slow. I saw the van become a black bloom. I saw the glass of the bus shelter turn to a curtain of glittering dust and hang in the air. I saw pigeons come off the roofs in a gray panic, and I saw the guard. I saw him in the last instant before the pressure reached him, turn his back to the blast and fold his whole body around that wheelchair, around the boy, curl over him like a shell, making himself the wall. Then the dust took everything, and I couldn't see anything at all. I don't know how long I was on the grass, seconds, maybe less. Time did that thing where it stops being a line. When my hearing came back, it came back as a scream, a high, thin whine, and then under it, human sounds, crying, a car alarm, someone calling a name over and over, the grit of dust in my teeth. My hands were bleeding, and I didn't know why or when. I got up, I don't know how, and I ran back toward the corner, toward where the van had been, along with a handful of others, because that's the other thing nobody tells you. A crowd runs away from a blast, and then within a minute, a smaller, braver crowd runs back into it. Ordinary people. A bus driver. A man in a suit with his tie over his shoulder. The schoolteacher who'd gotten her kids to safety and come straight back. The corner was unrecognizable. Where the van had stood there was a black scar and a crater and things burning that shouldn't burn. Every window on that side of the street was gone. The air was full of smoke and paper, thousands of scraps of paper drifting down like awful snow. The old cafe awning was on fire. And in the middle of it, on the grass, was the guard. He was on his side. The wheelchair was next to him, tipped, one wheel still spinning. And the boy was crying. Loudly, furiously. Alive, sitting on the grass where the guard's arms had set him down, or shielded him down, bleeding from one ear and screaming his head off, which is the most beautiful sound a hurt child can make, because it means they can still scream. The guard was not screaming. The guard was not moving. His red tunic was torn across the back, and dark with something that wasn't red the way the tunic was red. His body had taken the blast. All of it. Every bit of it that would have hit the boy, he had taken into his own back, folded over that child like a man folding over a candle in the wind. The boy's father reached them first, having fought his way back, and he fell on his knees and gathered his son up and made a sound I have never heard a grown man make and hope never to hear again. A sound of grief and relief so tangled together it can't be described. And even as he held his boy, he was reaching out with one hand to the guard, saying, you saved him, oh God, you saved him," to a man who couldn't hear him. I knelt down by the guard's head. I didn't know first aid, not really, not for this, but I knelt there because I couldn't not. His eyes were open. He was breathing in these terrible, shallow sips, and his eyes were still doing the thing they'd done all morning, moving, working, checking. They found the boy. They found the father holding the boy, and I swear to you, I swear on anything you like, that when they saw the boy was alive, something in his face let go. The effort went out of it, not death, not yet, just permission. Like a man who has been holding a door shut against a storm, and finally feels someone take the weight on the other side, and can loosen his hands. "He's all right," I told him, bending close, not knowing if he could hear me. "You did it, mate. He's all right. You got him." "You got him." His lips moved. I put my ear right down to them, and over the alarms and the screaming and the whine still ringing in my own head, I heard him breathe out 4 words, different 4 words than before. "Is my post covered?" Not even a question, really. There was no strength left in it to be a question, but that's what he said. "Is my post covered?" Lying in a crater with his back opened up, the only thing he wanted to know was whether the spot he'd left, the spot he'd broken his sacred oath to leave, was covered, whether he'd left a gap. I didn't know what to say, so I lied to a dying man, and I've never once regretted it. "It's covered," I told him. "Don't worry about your post, it's covered, you held it. You held it, son." And the sirens were coming now, that whole city of sirens rising up out of the distance and rushing toward us. And I stayed there on my knees in the glass with my hand on the shoulder of a man whose name I didn't even know, telling him over and over that he'd held the line. The paramedics reached him and moved me aside, gently, the way they do, and I stood back and let them work. I remember standing there with my useless bleeding hands hanging at my sides, watching a ring of professionals close around him, and feeling suddenly like a child. There was nothing left for me to do. The morning had taken everything out of me and left me standing in a field of broken glass with a burnt smell in my nose that I still get, sometimes, out of nowhere, years later. They took him away fast. The boy went in a different ambulance with his father, the boy still crying, which, I'll say it again, was the most reassuring sound in the world. And then the corner filled up with the machinery of a city responding to the worst thing that can happen to it. Police tape, fire crews, men and women in serious jackets. They pushed us all back and started the long, grim work, and I found myself sitting on a low wall 100 yards away with a foil blanket round my shoulders that I don't remember being given, next to the old woman in the sensible coat, who was crying without making any noise at all. "He knew," she said to me after a long time. "Didn't he? That soldier, he knew before any of us." "Yeah," I said. "He knew." They were laughing at him, her voice cracked on it. Those children, they were laughing at him and telling him to sing, and the whole time she couldn't finish. She didn't need to. I looked for the 3 of them, the kids with the phones, and I found them eventually, sitting apart on the grass near the trees, and I want to tell you something about them because it matters to the story. They weren't laughing. Obviously they weren't laughing, but it was more than that. Orange Jacket, the ringleader, the one who'd flicked the man's cap and called him a coward and a doll. He was sitting with his knees drawn up and his face in his hands, and his shoulders were going, and the girl had her arm round him, and none of them were looking at their phones. The phones were on the grass, face down, forgotten. I've thought a lot about that boy. Everyone always wants me to hate him, and I understand why. He humiliated a hero in the last ordinary hour of that hero's ordinary life. But I watched him break apart on that grass, and what I saw wasn't a villain. It was a kid who just learned, all at once and far too young, the true weight of a man he'd decided was a joke. The man he'd called a coward had, minutes later, walked toward a bomb to carry a stranger's child out of its reach. There's no video edit that survives that. There's no witty caption. He'd been laughing at the exact thing in a human being that is the most worth respecting, and the universe had shown him, in the cruelest way it knows, exactly how wrong he'd been. I'm told the video never went online. I'm told the boy deleted it himself, all of it, before he even left the park. I hope that's true. I like to think it is. His name, I learned later from the papers, from the small ceremony they held, was not something I'll put here, out of respect for people who are still living. But I learned other things about him, and I'll tell you those, because they're the shape of the man. He was 34. He'd served 3 tours overseas before he came home to the ceremonial regiment. The stiff left leg I'd noticed, the limp he'd hidden by never walking, was from an injury on his last tour, an injury that, by rights, should have retired him out of soldiering altogether. He'd fought to stay in. He'd fought to keep standing his post, a post that a lot of people, I imagine, thought was just a photo opportunity for tourists. Just a man in a silly hat who couldn't move. He had a wife. He had a daughter who was 4. There's a photograph they printed of him holding her on his shoulders at a park, a different park, a happy one, and she has both her tiny hands buried in his hair and they're both laughing. And I had to put the paper down when I saw it because the hair in that photo was the same dark hair I'd seen matted with sweat and dust as he carried a stranger's son away from a blast. And I learned the thing that undid me completely, the thing I think about most. In the weeks he'd been posted at that corner, in all those mornings I'd watched him stand like a statue and never once acknowledge me or my cart or anything human around him. He had noticed everything. The investigators worked out, from what he'd radioed in his last minutes and from the discipline of his movements, that he'd clocked that van hours before it went off. He'd flagged it. He'd been watching it, calculating it, holding his position and his silence and doing his actual job, which was never about singing songs or posing for photos. His job was to see, to stand still enough and quiet enough and patient enough that he could see the one wrong thing in a sea of ordinary things. The tourists thought his stillness was emptiness. It was the opposite. His stillness was the most awake a person can be. He held that corner alive in his mind while a child flicked his cap. And when the moment came that his stillness could no longer protect the people around him, he gave up the one thing he was sworn never to give up, his post. And then he gave up the only thing he had left after that. He didn't die at the scene. I'll tell you that because people always ask and always brace themselves. He held on for 2 days. His wife was with him. The boy's family were allowed to see him briefly, and I'm told the boy, the 10-year-old, the one in the wheelchair, was brought to the door of the room in a hospital chair of his own, and that the guard, who could barely speak by then, lifted one hand off the bed a few inches just to wave at him. Just to let the kid see he was seen. And then he was gone. They gave him a medal, the highest kind. His daughter, the 4-year-old with her hands in his hair, will grow up with a piece of metal in a box and a folded flag and 100 strangers who'll tell her all her life that her dad was the bravest man they ever saw. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's true, and maybe true has to be enough because it's what we've got. I still sell coffee near that corner. They rebuilt it. You'd hardly know now unless you knew where to look. There's new paving where the crater was. The bus shelter's back. The trees are still there, older, going gold again every September like nothing ever happened. There's a small plaque now, low on the wall, easy to miss. Most tourists walk straight past it. They come and they stand near the guards. There are always guards. There will always be guards, and they take their photos and pull their faces, and once in a while, I still hear it. Someone will lean in and say, "Go on, mate, give us a smile, give us a song," and laugh and film it, and think they're the first person clever enough to think of it. And I want to go over. Every time I want to go over with my dishcloth and my aching feet and say to them, "Do you have any idea what that stillness is? Do you have any idea what he's holding while you laugh? Do you know what one of them once did right here on a Tuesday for a boy he never met?" I never do. It's not my place and they wouldn't hear it anyway. You can't tell people. They have to be shown, and God willing they never will be, because the showing costs too much. But I'll tell you, because you've stayed this long and you'll carry it now, and that's the only monument that ever really lasts, the carrying. 3 tourists once asked a royal guard to sing them a song, to prove he was a real man and not a doll in a hat. He never sang a note. He just picked up a child and walked toward the fire and showed them, and all of us, and everyone who ever laughed at a man for standing still, that some people are quiet because they are listening for the exact moment the rest of us will need them. And when that moment came, he didn't hesitate for even one breath. He was real. He was the realest man on that whole corner. And he never had to say a word to prove it. There's a thing that happens to a place after something like that, and nobody warns you about it. For weeks, the corner was famous. People came who had no reason to come. They stood at the edge of the tape while it was still up. And then, when the tape came down and the new paving went in, they came and stood on that instead, and laid flowers. And it was the strangest thing to watch, my little coffee cart. Back in business too soon, surrounded by a slow river of strangers carrying bunches of petrol station carnations to a spot where a man they'd never met had knelt over a boy. The flowers piled up against the wall until they were waist-high, cellophane and ribbon and rain-soaked cards. I read some of them when it was quiet. Most just said thank you. Some were long. One, in a child's handwriting, said, "I am sorry we were mean to a guard once." We will not do it again, and I don't know if that child had anything to do with anything, if they'd ever even been to London, but I had to go and sit in the back of my cart for a while after I read it. A woman came almost every day for a month, older, always alone. She'd stand at the wall for 10 minutes, never crying, never speaking, and then leave. I worked out eventually, from something she said one gray afternoon when she bought a tea off me just to have a reason to stop, that she was his mother. She'd raised him a few streets from where he ended up standing guard in a part of London that has since forgotten it ever produced anyone. She told me, quietly, both hands round the paper cup for the warmth, that when he was small he used to line his toy soldiers up on the windowsill in perfect rows and get upset if one of them fell over. He always wanted them to hold the line, she said, and gave a little laugh that wasn't a laugh. Even then, even when he was 5. And she drank her tea and thanked me and went, and I never saw her again, and I hope with everything I have that she found some way to keep breathing through the years that came after. The funeral I went to. I wasn't invited, not properly. Who was I, the coffee man? But they'd opened part of the route to the public, and I stood on the pavement with thousands of others, and I watched them carry him through the city he died protecting. You've maybe seen those processions on the television. The horses, the slow drums, the cap and the sword laid on top of the coffin and the flag over it, folded so precisely, and the men marching in a stillness that looked so much like the stillness I'd watched him hold on that corner. It hit me differently standing there because I knew now what that stillness cost, what it held. I looked at every young soldier's blank forward-facing eyes as they passed, and I thought, any one of you would do what he did. You're all standing there being laughed at and photographed, and none of us have the faintest idea. The whole route was silent. A whole city silent. You wouldn't think London could do it, but it did. The only sounds were the horses' hooves and the drum, and here and there, someone unable to hold it in. And then I saw the wheelchair. They'd put the boy near the front by the steps with his family. He was in his good clothes, and he'd been given a little wooden box to hold, and he held it against his chest with both arms the whole time, and I recognized the shape of him, the specific shape of a boy in a chair, because I'd last seen that shape lifted clean off the ground against a soldier's stiff left leg. He watched the coffin go by, and his face was doing something no 10-year-old's face should have to do. And as it passed him, he did a thing that broke the whole crowd around me. He lifted one small hand off the box and he waved, just a little. The same little wave, I was told later, that the guard had given him from the hospital bed. He gave it back. He gave the man his own wave back as a goodbye. I don't mind telling you I wasn't the only grown man weeping on that pavement. There were hundreds of us, strangers, shoulder to shoulder, undone by a child's small hand. The 3 tourists, I'll finish their part of it, because a story like this owes you the whole shape of everyone in it, not just the ones who are easy to love. I never saw the girl or the second lad again, but Orange Jacket, the ringleader, the one who'd flicked the cap and demanded a song and called the man a coward, he came back. Once. Nearly a year later. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost the swagger, obviously, but it was more than that. He looked older in a way that had nothing to do with the year that had passed. He came to my cart and stood there a while before he ordered anything, and then he ordered a coffee he clearly didn't want, and I made it, and he paid, and he didn't leave. You were here, he said finally. That day, you were the one shouting at people to run. I was here, I said. He looked over at the wall at the plaque, which by then was all that was left of the flowers. I've watched it back, he said. The video, before I deleted it, I watched it about 100 times. His voice was very careful, like he was walking across ice. You can see it if you know what you're looking for. His eyes, he keeps looking past me. The whole time the whole time, he's looking past me at the van. He already knew, and I'm right in his face calling him he stopped. He couldn't say the word he'd used. Good. He could have just shoved me off and dealt with it. He'd have been well within his rights. He never even looked at me, not properly. I wasn't even worth looking at next to what he was doing. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that he hadn't already said harder to himself. I think about him every day, he said. Is that mental? I never met him. He never said one word to me except get away from there. And I think about him every single day. It's not mental, I told him. I think about him too. He nodded. He drank about half of the coffee he didn't want. And before he went, he said one more thing, quietly, almost to himself. I'm going to be someone he wouldn't have been ashamed of. That's the plan. And he left, and I never saw him again either, and I have no idea if he managed it. But I've chosen to believe he did, It costs me nothing, and it lets the boy in the orange jacket be more than the worst hour of his life, and I think the guard of all people would have wanted that. He walked toward a bomb for a stranger's child. I don't imagine he'd have wanted a foolish 19-year-old to be destroyed by one bad morning. The boy in the wheelchair, I'll tell you the last thing, and then I'll let you go, because this is the part that puts me back together every time the rest of it takes me apart. Years passed, more than I'd care to count honestly. My knees will tell you exactly how many. The corner healed. The world moved on the way it always does, hungrily, forgetting. New tourists, new phones, new faces leaning in to ask the new guards for a smile. And one autumn afternoon, September again, gold in the trees again, a young man stopped at my cart. Tall, standing on his own 2 feet with a cane, walking slow but walking. He ordered a coffee and he looked at me a long moment and said, "You won't remember me." And I did. God help me, I did. Something in the shape of the face. I hadn't seen him upright ever, not once, but I knew him. He'd grown up, the boy from the chair. He'd had operations, years of them, and he could walk now, some days, with the cane. He'd come back to the corner on purpose. He came back every year, he told me, on the day. He stood at the plaque a while, and then he came and found the coffee man because someone had told him, somewhere along the way, that there'd been a coffee man who knelt by the guard at the end and told him the boy was all right. "Was that you?" he asked. "That was me," I said. And this grown boy, this walking miracle in a September coat, put his coffee down on my cart and put his arms around me, a total stranger, and held on. And over my shoulder he said, in a voice I'll hear until the day I die, "Thank you for telling him I made it. He needed to know. Thank you for telling him." I held him back. What else do you do? I held the boy the guard died for, standing on the corner where it happened. And neither of us said anything for a good long while. And the golden leaves came down around us like the whole city was gently letting something go. So that's it, that's the whole of it. That's the day 3 tourists asked a royal guard to sing. He didn't sing, he didn't smile, he didn't so much as look at them. He just stood there still as stone, holding the line the way he'd lined up his soldiers on a windowsill when he was 5 years old and afraid of any of them falling over. He stood there being laughed at, being filmed, being called a coward and a doll, and the whole time he was doing the truest, most awake, most human thing on that entire street. He was watching. He was ready. He was there. And when the moment came, the one moment his stillness had been built and drilled and suffered for, he broke every rule he'd sworn to keep, and he ran toward the fire for a child he'd never met, and he folded his body over that child like a shell, and he gave everything he had, and he never asked for one thing back. They wanted a song out of him. He gave them something no song could ever hold. He gave them the truth about what a quiet man can be. And I've been trying ever since in my own small way, standing at my little cart on the corner where it happened. I've been trying to be worth having seen it.